Hello, this is Renew Education. We are looking at another case study here. This case study I call Big Future. And the reason why I call this one Big Future is because this person has had a lot of dentistry and has still a big future of dentistry to do. That's going to come apart. And let me just highlight that a little bit here. If we look at this situation here where the patient has root canal treated teeth, a 4-unit bridge, they've got this root canal treated teeth, they've got a missing area here, they've got a bridge to a natural tooth, they got root canals here, they got fillings there, they got splinted implant crowns here, they've got let's go over here, this real high flare on their teeth here. So with all of that, they've got a lot of stuff going on, and this is why I call it Big Future. They've got this huge flare going on. So let's look at what the treatment assessment would actually be. This is a red bone density. We're going to look at sites number 13 and 14, and I'll generally talk about the rest too. Red sinus and red ortho flare. So if this person ever goes into a denture piece, it's going to be fairly difficult to deal with this kind of flare with that kind of weak bone up in the posterior area. Now the patient does have other implants, but they're mostly on the bottom area here. So if this patient turns into a denture case on the bottom, they would have to add maybe an implant here or here to then maintain the stability for a full arch piece on the bottom. On the upper, very different because of that flare and because of that weaker bone. So let's look at this site here together and figure out what could be, but also what maybe in the future that might be predictable, that might be the failure with this kind of case. And when you understand that type of failure that a patient might be undergoing in the future, it's very good to be talking to the patient about that future that you see, you know, from your experience or from other doctors' experiences like this kind of video, to give a little foresight so hopefully they can take action to not bite as hard or not bite hard on the front. And if these root canal treated teeth are, 10, 15, 20 years old, it's going to fall apart. Nothing lasts forever. So I tell the patient that they do understand that nothing lasts forever, even though they dream and would love to have dentistry last forever. The bad part is that when you get it all done 20 years ago, you're going to be restoring it all again 20 years later. So that could be today, right? So I've discussed a lot of this with this patient. So luckily we've only replaced a number of things in the front. We haven't had any major stuff here to really deal with in terms of all this other work that is done. I think we've changed some things here, but anyway, you get the idea. So let's look at number 13 and 14 site real quick. Okay. So let's take this over here and let's look at how much bone it is here. So here's that site. This is the number 14 area. And you can see just how poor that bone is. That's little. Maybe the density is more of an orange than a red. I'm still giving it a red. The sinus definitely comes down. I'm into the 13 area. There's just no bone. The problem I have with, looking at a CT in this nature where the bone is not very dense is that the density of the tissue shows up just as much as the density of the bone. So you can't expect that the bone has a whole lot of density in it here. So, when it looks very similar between the tissue and the bone, you better bet that it's pretty soft regardless of fancy tricks from your software or anything else. It's just, x-rays are just looking at density, and that's all they're doing. So Let's look at how would you solve this. Definitely a sinus lift. Could you do a crestal approach? Yeah, probably. Let's just look here. I'm imagining that the bone is actually this tall and at least this wide. So, you could do a 4.2 by 10, do a sinus bump here, and get an implant, be successful there. You want it, that's in the 14 area, and what's interesting here is that's a collapsed spacing here. So you could get away with doing 2, or you do 2 splinted premolar sized teeth here with 2 implants, or you try to get something here that's fairly large, and then you make kind of a bridge piece across these 2 implants. Now at first on this case, when I looked at that implant, I was a little bit concerned about the apical area here, but it looks like they're clear on missing that. And I think this is actually a really good example of how somebody's flare of their arch flares their teeth, but as you round the corners of the canine area, you get an occlusal load that's more straight up and down with the bone structure. So let's look at that. So let's look at this implant placement here. It's still in a kind of a flared manner just because that's the only bone she has to get that in. You couldn't really do anything better than this. Maybe put a size smaller of an implant there. Let me get rid of those measurements. There's bone on either side. Now there's so much metal and X-ray kind of distracting kind of materials here, so you're getting a lot of artifact going on with blackout here or blackout problems here and scatter and all that stuff. So it's very difficult to see how much bone is on the facial plate here. But the problem is, I would say probably would have been a little bit better to do a little bit of a smaller diameter implant. Let me see what that is. Yeah, it's a 4.2. That's fine. It definitely works, so that's great. And I think they couldn't really do any better than that. But they have a load that's going straight up into the implant when it looks very angled here. And as we kind of cruise across into the anterior, you can just see how much constriction this is and how problematic it actually really was. So having that implant, this is the tooth next door, and how difficult this actually really was. Look at that constriction here. So this is definitely a red constriction case as well, even though we're not really dealing with that directly on this one. But this is a very difficult case when the patient loses their front teeth, which gets you to the point of warning. Maybe I should call this one warning Will Robinson or something, because there's a big warning on a case like this where the bone is very, very thin. It has a constrictive element to it. And when this patient has this giant flare and root canal treated teeth, this is a very, very delicate case to work with. So not only do you have a problem across the board, it's just that if you fix this and start working with this patient, and they like you and they trust you after that experience, you're going to have a lot of other dentistry in the near future for this person. So definitely hygiene, definitely keep that care going. Make sure that they understand that this is not going to be a great future for them, that their future is kind of got a lot of dentistry in the future. So anyway, thanks a lot for staying and watching this case study. Check us out and like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and check us out for our live broadcast. Bye.